Hey y'all, it's KimBoo, and this is the video to watch if you want an actual overview of the parts and elements of the PPM method. The Personal Projects Management method is a system that is fluid and flexible and gives you a meta, like a very high level view of everything that you've got going on in your life, and by doing so allows you to plug in the pieces that you need to be doing on a regular basis versus the projects that are ongoing but might end, versus the programs that are ongoing and just will never end. A lot of terms. I'm going to have separate videos going over some of those terms in more detail, but this video is an overview of what the pieces are. So when you first start the PPM method, if you've bought the book, bought the toolkit, you've got the PPM method for solopreneurs and your hot little hands, and you're looking at what is this really about, and you kind of need a clue in. That's what I'm here for. This is the clue in right here, right now. The first step you're going to take is to do a brain dump. I go into a lot of detail in this on the book. The important thing is to remember is that you need to know what you're doing in order to be able to organize what you're doing. You can't just kind of on the fly think, oh, I've got to get an email out on Monday to my subscribers. Like, there are people who can do that. There's a lot more of us who can't. And so what we need to do is have you sit down, do a massive brain dump. This can be one of the more exhausting steps of the whole process, honestly. I do suggest taking time aside. It's either a couple of hours for a day. Some people spread it out over a few days. They do a little bit every day. Some people actually just write down what they're doing as they do it, so it takes a full week, but they're not actually taking time out of their schedule to do a brain dump. They're just kind of creating it as they go along. Again, as with most things in PPM, there's multiple ways of getting the job done. Whatever works for you. And that is what I think is the most important lesson as you go into using and implementing the PPM method, is that what matters is what works for you. Not what works for me, not what works for some, productivity guru on YouTube or TikTok or wherever. What works for you. So the brain dump, even though in essence everybody's doing the same thing, we are all going to be putting down everything that we do, all the responsibilities that we have over the course of a week or a month or whatever time frame you want to use. In the end, we're all still going to come up with a big, long list of stuff. One of the things I encourage people to do is to do the brain dump on index cards, or use a mind map, or create a list in like a digital app like Excel or a notes app, so that you can move pieces around easily. I find a lot of times people don't just do a brain dump, they do several versions of it as they move things around and start looking at relations for them. Once you've done the brain dump, at that point you're going into the implementation stage of PPM. Again, this is an energy intensive stage, but the whole purpose of putting everything on the front end, loading it on the front end, is so that when you get to the actual using it on a daily basis, it's on cruise control. You don't have to sit there and rewrite all your lists every single day. It's like, you know what needs to be done. You know where to find out what you need to do. You've got all your resources collected. You've got everything that you need in a space, and we'll talk about that more. But that's the point. So implementation is very important. There's multiple ways to do implementation. I personally, when I sitting down and creating this method, did top down or macro implementation. In other words, I figured out what my guideposts were, and then I worked down to my programs and my projects, and then to my calendars. Last of all, my friend Gina, who is basically my guinea pig as I created this whole system, she did it the opposite way, which blows my mind. Like, I was writing that section of the book, and I'm like, Gina, how does this, what? Could you give me some idea? Like, she basically wrote that section because I was clueless. But she started with her calendars. And by building up from her calendar, she was able to identify her programs and her projects. And then from there, she was able to consolidate and solidify what her guidepost is. So what are all those terms and what do they mean? Well, guideposts are basically the main enterprises in your life that you're doing, that you're engaged with. And the obvious ones for solopreneurs, of course, is your business. But that can mean a lot of different things. For instance, my business is me, KimBoo York. I'm an author. I'm the Task Mistress. I also run a site for motivation coaching for authors called The Author Alchemist, which is where I have my podcast. I'm also a fiction writer. I write gay male fan fiction under my Cooper West pseudonym, and I write polyamorous, fantasy, supernatural, romance novels under KimBoo York. So I have a lot of things going on. A lot of things going on. And that is not unusual. For solopreneurs, freelancers, like we have a lot of irons in the fire. So the question is, what's really a guidepost? Well, a guidepost is the largest bucket you can put everything under. Now, I have two pin names, Cooper West and KimBoo York, and so I could just have a guidepost that says author, author. And the two names, the two pin names that I have under it could be projects, or rather programs, honestly, under that guidepost. I didn't do it that way. That's one of the reasons PPM is so good, because like for me that was too much. It just created too many layers. So I made I made Cooper West a guidepost and I made KimBoo York a guidepost, which makes sense to me because even though they're both me being a writer and publishing romantic fiction, the demographics of who I'm writing for are so different. There's very little overlap. There's no overlap. I would be shocked if there's much overlap between those two audiences. Any overlap in those two audiences are probably people like my family and my best friends, who all buy my work no matter who wrote it, right? But like in general, like those email lists go to completely different people. And so for me to break that down separately, it was very important. So if you have a business entity, it's worth taking your time to decide if that business entity, in my case, I use the term York Enterprises. It's not incorporated yet, but it's on my list of things to do. So York Enterprises is kind of like my meta entity that everything is under, but as a bucket, it's pretty useless because everything's in it. So that's why I break things down. For you, it may be different. You might have a business, and that is just the right size bucket where you can put everything into that's business related. If you're a freelancer or if you're a creative artist who is, for instance, doing commissions while also trying to get some of your fine art into juried, exhibitions, is that under your artist guidepost, or is your commercial art and your fine art two separate guideposts that require very different approaches? Only you can decide that. I do find that some general guideposts tend to be things like parent or homemaker, um, academic education. If somebody's going back for a degree, whether it's finally finishing up their undergraduate degree, or they're going for a master's degree, or if they're going for certification. There's project management certification if you're interested in that, or if you're just doing a trade school, and if you've decided, I am going to be an electrician, and so I've got to go to trade school, and then I'm going to have to do an apprenticeship, and that's a guidepost. That is absolutely a guidepost in your life, because as a major enterprise, it takes a lot of effort. So those are the largest buckets that you've got in the PPM system. And the reason that I do this is like you can only have up to 6, preferably 3 to 4. A lot of people get really with that kind of restriction. I have 5. My 5th one is wellness, and it's kind of, I admit right up front, it's kind of wishy-washy, but I like it as a guidepost because it reminds me that I need to try to eat healthy and I need to work out and, I need to walk my dog, and all that comes under wellness for me. It doesn't really take a lot of project management, but I like having it as a guidepost, as a reminder of how important that is to me and how much time I need to invest in that aspect of my life. But you just can't have too many, and I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. One of the things that I think is very challenging for people when they start the PPM method is to realize that, their time, like your life, our lives, we are all limited creatures. We are not infinite. Good or bad, I don't know, but that's the way it is. That's the way the cookie crumbles. And so we have to decide. You have to decide. The PPM method makes you decide what's really important, what is really going to take up your time and your energy and your efforts. If you have 15 really big important things you want to do, well, you don't have time to do them all at the same time. And I know people don't like to hear that. People are like, well, if I just slice my day up into smaller slices and I only sleep 7 hours and 15 minutes, then I'll have all the, and if it works for you, Lord Almighty, all power to you, my friend. That's great. But it's not really a healthy way to live. And it's not going to do your business or your personal life any good. It's really not. So you're going to have to choose what your guideposts are. 6 maximum, 3 to 4 ideal, unless you do like me, like you have a 5th that's kind of a wishy-washy one. At that point, you look at your guideposts as your big buckets, and then you look at the next level of buckets, as I like to call them, and that's programs and projects. I have to explain this in a way that, because yeah, you can tell this is a fun one. So what's the difference between a program and a project? Well, a project is something with a start date and an end date, or a start and an end. It doesn't necessarily have to be a date, but it is something that's going to happen eventually and then will come to a close. For me, that's writing a novel. I do not write to the calendar. I do not know when I'm going to finish a book, but I know that the book's gonna get finished. It has a start and it has an end, and that's how that lives in my life, with a start and an end date. The programs, on the other hand, a lot of people get confused because they're like, well, they look a lot like projects. They have steps that you need to do in a certain order. But programs are repeat. Programs don't end. So, for instance, it's not like, churning a wheel or something like that never ends. But it's a series of steps that get repeated. I have a podcast. I don't have a date in mind for when I'm going to stop doing the podcast. I mean, if I win the lottery, then I'm going to stop doing the podcast. Like, there's certain things in my life, yeah, I'll stop them. But as of right now, I don't plan on stop doing a podcast. So it's a program because it's repeating. Now, it has individual steps. I have to plan the episodes. I have to schedule time to record the episodes. I have to schedule time to edit the episodes. I have to upload the episodes and then write show notes and take care of the transcripts and do any advertising and marketing for that. Those are all steps. But when I get to the end of that step, it's not done. It just starts over again. That's a program. So it's very important. A lot of marketing, a lot of advertising are what I would consider programs. If you're not really sure if something you're working on is a project or a program, then take a look on whether it repeats or not. But those are the 2 main buckets that everything's going to fall into. So next in the PPM system, once you've got your guideposts, or in reverse, however you break it down, you're going to be, once you've got your calendars, depending on if you do the macro or the micro, top down, bottom up, you're going to be looking at what your projects and programs are and which guideposts they belong to. And these are all worksheets, and I'm eventually going to do some videos that actually break down the worksheets and show you exactly how they are used. This is just an overview telling how the system works. Once you've identified your programs and your projects and you have all the steps or the tasks listed out for each one of them, it's not as overwhelming as you fear. Sometimes they get a little complex, and I'll be doing case studies on those down the road. But once you've done that, then you can look at your calendars. If you've done the micro view, if you started with the bottom up implementation, then you already have your calendars. But at this point, you're probably going to want to go back and refine them. You're going to want to go back and look at your projects and your programs and think, wait, I have these tasks spread out over 2 weeks. Could I batch them? Could I do them, every Tuesday instead of doing them, every other day for half an hour for 2 weeks and then starting over again? You're going to really look at your calendars, your perpetual calendars, with different eyes, because you're going to see how things relate to each other once you filled out the program and the project's sheets, worksheets, whether you do it digitally or whether you do it by hand. You're going to see a lot more things, how things are interrelated and how you can streamline them. If you've worked from top down like I would do, then at this point, that's when you start filling in the calendars for the first time. That's when you start looking at, okay, well, if I'm doing a podcast and it's coming out every 2 weeks, which I tried doing every week, but with everything else that I'm going on, hey, I looked at my perpetual calendar, so I was like, no can do. No can do. I've got to spread that out a little bit more, because I need free time. I need creative time, and that's an important part. If you're a writer, if you're creative, or if you're creating products, creating online courses, creating digital products that you plan to sell, you've got to have that time set aside to develop those things. You gotta. That's going to have to be part of your calendar. So if you're so busy spinning the hamster wheel trying to get all your business administrative stuff done that you can't get to your creative work, your business is never going to thrive. Your business is it's just not going to go anywhere. If one of your guideposts is education or certification or trade school, if you're busy just trying to keep the wheels in motion, you're going to really have time to put yourself into the homework or the assignments that you've been given. It's the important stuff that you've got to think about, and that PPM allows you to really see and break down and understand how these things impact your calendar. So you've heard me talking about perpetual calendars here on this video. Actually, there's a lot more to those, and I will be doing a video where we go into examples and I talk about how they're used and the value of them. So look for that if you're curious, but essentially they're master calendars that you can look at that do not change. So if you've got something you need to do every Tuesday, it's on your perpetual calendar and it shows that every Tuesday you have to do this specific thing. And one of the reasons that we remove these items from, say, your Google Calendar or your iCal or a paper planner is that it's easy for those schedulers, and that's what I call those are schedulers really, those schedulers to get overwhelmed, to get so chocked full of stuff, and not even stuff that's related to your projects or your programs. Birthdays, anniversaries, holidays, vacation days, other stuff that comes up, meetings, and if you've got a day full of meetings, it can easily overload that day on your calendar and you forget that you've got other things you're supposed to be doing that day. So perpetual calendar will keep you on track for that. Perpetual calendar will let you know exactly what needs to be done despite everything else, no matter if you have 45 other things on your calendar for that day. These are the things that must happen based on your guideposts, based on the things that you've decided are important to you. And that's what makes PPM method so beneficial to the people who are using it. So that's a real quick overview of the main, tip poles of the PPM method. Again, look for other videos on things like the terms that I'm using here. I'm going to go make a video that goes into a lot more detail on projects and programs, a lot more detail on perpetual calendars, and also the worksheets going in. That was one of the biggest requests I've got, so going over the worksheets so people can actually see them in action. I'll be doing that. So look for that, subscribe, hit the little subscribe-y thing, click the little bell so that you get notifications when I upload new videos, and I will see you again soon. So thank y'all. Bye.